You know what I realized is none of us decided who was talking first, so I'll do it.
I was going to say I thought we defaulted to you anyway. So
we default to me, Dan. That sucks. Hey everybody, welcome to Something Old, Something New, and we did not put anything blue or borrowed on this slide.
None of us are getting married.
None of us are getting married. All of us are married, as far as I'm aware. So, yeah. I mean, I've not seen marriage licenses for any of you, but I believe. And this is the season of believing. So, well, yeah, I probably should not be the voice of security. I've said that for years. You guys keep putting me out here. Hey, everybody, if you don't know, I'm Kevin. I am the CEO and one of the founders of Secure Ideas. I am also, as of January, an OWASP board member, and I realized it's not on there. I need to update that. I even complained that other people hadn't updated their bio, and I didn't update mine.
Yeah, but it doesn't start yet, so you still
it's not there yet.
That's not.
It says OWASP leader. I mean,
yeah, that's good. I do have this book, Robert's Rules of Order.
Oh gosh,
I did. So, I'm Kevin,
and the condensed version that's still half the size. That one too, right? Yeah. So it just, yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
We'll leave it at that.
Never mind. That's not the topic here. I'm going to try not to digress too much. I'm Jason. I am the CIO at Secure Ideas.
We think.
And I see that I don't have. I work with OWASP as well as a project committee member as of recently.
So you also didn't.
I didn't yours. No. So I'm actually in trouble because that's current. I'm basically slipping into the spot that Kevin vacated when he moved over to the board. So.
Yeah, it turned out when I got accepted to the board, and we knew that I couldn't stay on the project committee, but OWASP realized they don't really have a process to replace committee members.
You didn't have a process for adding members either. So
right. So I just asked Harold, one of the employees, I'm like, okay, well, what do we do? Like, do I recommend somebody? And he's like, yeah, that works.
Sure. Yeah, let's do that. Awesome. So much for rules of order. But anyway.
Hey, that's me. So I'm Nathan Sweaney.
Hey, that's me.
I couldn't remember if Eric or I were next. So I'm one of the principal consultants here at Secure Ideas. I'm a little different than most of the rest of our team because a lot of our folks come from a specific, developer, sysadmin, networking, that kind of thing. I've kind of had some experience all over the map and do a lot of different things. I'm really involved in the Tulsa area, a little bit Oklahoma City as well, but all of the security groups, including B-Sides OK, which is better than OK. Before Kevin gets a chance to make
I wasn't going to say it. I wasn't going to say it.
He was there.
Glad to be here.
And I'm Eric Kuehn, also NIMS faculty. My specialty is really around Active Directory and Windows stuff, networks in general. Out of the Charlotte area, we always kind of, man, I can't talk because I can't.
You're on a webcast.
And I'm on a webcast. It's awesome. Webcast is not feeling great. It's perfect. Always smirk a little bit when I say south of Charlotte because I'm southeast across the border, but right around there. Yeah, definitely network focused, but enjoy doing all of the other things that we do as well. The movies on there twice for my interest is important. I like movies a lot, so I thought I'd put it on there twice.
I think you also count as our something blue. Because you've got blue.
He does.
That's true. I have blue in both places. So there we go. So
I gotta ask, for something new, do you mean to be determined, or did you mean to be announced? And so have you decided what your new interest is, or are you going to decide?
I want to figure something. This is all right. My oldest is in college. The middle two are about to disappear to college. They actually, finished. So that'll leave one who can drive himself everywhere. So assuming
it's a hobby. So here's my question.
We need a poll.
Are you okay telling us how old you are on this recording?
Yes, I have to do math really fast, but yeah, I can do that.
Okay. How old are you?
Yeah, see, I should have done the math already.
Yes, you should have.
I'm turning 48 in a couple.
Okay, So you understand that according to the internet, if you are a man in your 40s, you have 3 choices. You get to pick woodworking. No, I'm sorry, 4 choices. Woodworking, brewing beer, smoking meat, or an obscene, absurd obsession with World War II history. Those are your 4 choices.
Those are my 4 choices.
Yes, that is.
Huh.
So ChatGPT also recommends photography, gardening, hiking, nature walking, cooking. Holy crap, it just keeps going and going.
I already cook. I did the photography thing once before and stopped. That was college.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. So
we'll blacksmithing is a good one.
Blacksmithing.
That'd be fun.
Yeah.
Well, we'll see. First, there are other things need to happen, like people need to move and all that type of stuff.
I understand.
Somebody moved to New Zealand. That works. I guess that's one way of doing it.
Yeah, that is what Sean. Just so I'm gonna do an aside here. Sean is. I worked with him at Blue Cross. He was one of the best network people I ever met. And
You said that before about people.
Yeah, normally Sean, and he has a podcast where he and another gentleman talk about different things, and it's excellent. So I'll just throw that out there.
No, I was talking about the guy that you hired because he was the smartest person you've ever known or something.
Oh God, don't. Sean knows him, so let's go on.
I'm going to point out when Kevin says one of, that doesn't give a number of how many that is. It's just
I often say there's a number of things that do this, and 0 is a number.
All right.
So 2023. I guess we can do both at the same time.
Yeah, kind of all at once.
Kind of got it all at once.
Is it different? Yes. One more.
Yeah, one more. Yeah. So I don't know. I guess that is kind of the big overall, right? Every time somebody does one of these talks, we always sit there as like, oh, do we want to do this type of talk or not? Of what do we see? What do we think is going to happen? And yeah, we're kind of like, not really. But it also is one of the talks that can be very interesting as we think about what we did see over the year. Yeah. And for me, it comes back to, I don't think we've actually seen much in the way of new things. We just see old things again with new names.
We have to give them new names for marketing reasons.
Well, hang on. But before you go down that path, though,
okay,
let's just caveat this with saying, let's put AI aside for a moment.
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
That is one thing that's everyone knows that.
Absolutely, that's new. Yep.
So let's just scoot that aside and just focus on everything that's not related to LLMs, and we can come back to that.
Okay,
part after.
I'll agree.
So
who wants to go first?
Well, Jason Jason was Nathan, you're up.
Yeah.
Okay, well,
you smelt it, you dealt it. If you ask who goes next, you go next.
I love it. Well, I'll throw out the passkey thing. That's something that all the big tech vendors have been talking about for several years. Yeah. I think Google announced it 3 or 4 years ago. Apple announced it 2 or 3 years ago, something like that. They've been saying it's coming, but I actually gave a talk about passwordless authentication back in October. And I think 2 days before my talk, Google announced like, hey, this is going to be the new default. Like you have to choose to select a password instead of using passkeys. So if you're not familiar with that, it's basically just a certificate that gets put on your device, because we all have a mobile device everywhere now. And the certificate on your device allows you to authenticate to other things instead of a password. And so, I mean, that's a real simplification, but
yeah, I know I'm being pedantic, but this is actually, pet peeve's not the right word, phrase, but you said we all have a mobile device nowadays, and I know you don't mean it that way. I know that what I'm about to say you are aware of and everything else, but this is something I've argued with so many people about, is that there are still large percentages of the population, even if we just pay attention to the United States, but if you pay attention to the world, obviously that percentage is way higher, that don't have a smart device. And there is not as large, but still a significant population that does not have a mobile device at all. And this is an important thing to keep in mind. And I think Google did it right. Google said this is the default, not this is the only thing we're going to offer, right? And I think it's critical for people to understand. I was reading this really, really good article 6 months ago, and it's still accurate today, of how many disadvantaged, whatever the grouping is that you want to call it, that their only access to email is the library. And when you push these things of, hey, you have to have this device, you have to do this, and everything else like that, and where the biggest problem was for that is so many government agencies have moved, like welfare and food stamps, whatever, into digital only systems. And so these people are going to the library, they're using the library computers. Library computer, they do that reset 30 seconds later after you get up or whatever. And the person doesn't have, the computer's never recognized again, right?
Yeah.
And they don't have a device. And so I want to throw it out. And the reason I want to throw it out is because I know so many people that listen to these recordings are the people who make the decision. And I was shocked that in 2023, the percentages were as high as they were.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's good that we're moving that way as a default. And I think for the vast majority of users who are Microsoft, Apple, Google users, right? Like that's should be the first option, but
yeah. Well, and along with depending on what is chosen, right, is being brought up. You can't use it, so now we default to YubiKeys and other little things, right, that are out there as other options. Even then, if you have a pin on it, right, which you might have on your phone, unless you're using biometrics, who knows what you're using. Technically, there's still a password there when people think about it, right? So I agree. It's a great way for us to go. End users, though, if you start saying we're going to have passwordless authentication, they're going to not agree with you because to them, they're still going to see a password of some kind, depending on what you do.
I think that the thing is sometimes people, when people assume an absolute, when you say passwordless authentication, it doesn't mean every single time that's your only option. It means the majority of the time, regular everyday usage, we don't have to be throwing passwords around.
Yep.
So I'm all for that.
So it actually means what we actually mean is passwordless, like as in less password.
Yes. Well, I just had this conversation a week ago with one of the Irons customers that was talking about it, and they were like, we have to roll this out and everything else. And what is the sign? And I'm like, look, I agree with you. You have to roll it out, but keep in mind that until every single one of your internal applications, somebody, lady in accounting read a PHP in 21 seconds book and wrote an app that now became business critical until that thing supports this stuff.
Or centralized authentication or whatever it might be, right?
So I mean, what I think, which I think Eric alluded to it, but to your point, I think what folks need to do is be prepared to have a secure fallback method, right? It can't be an afterthought, because then you're back in the same problem. You're just creating the same problem all over again. So as this sort of thing rolls out, think about what the fallback should be, and make sure that the fallback is also a secure solution.
Yeah, which that's going to lead into more opportunities for social engineering attacks, right? If you don't have a strong solution to be able to validate those users in an alternative fashion, right? And so the training, the awareness, like you said, what does that solution look like? Those are all critical things to think through.
So I have a quick question for you, Nathan. As my I know you're not, but my typical Windows hater guy. Does Windows Hello count as passwordless authentication?
I think so. I think that's part of what's the Azure program? Microsoft's like, hey, this is so good, we're going to sell it now. There's like a free tier, and then there's different levels of tier for their.
You just described everything on Azure.
I know.
Hold on. They have a new product. They took all of these tools and they pulled it.
It's called Azure Heya.
Yep.
Instead of hello.
I would agree. I mean, I honestly agree, right, with the Windows Hello. I mean, I've gone back and forth about it, but I mean, it definitely falls into that same category. This device that I have, when I get into it, allows me to get to everything else, assuming that those apps.
So the one problem I have with it, Eric, is that you don't type your password in very often at all, because I use the facial recognition Windows Hello.
I don't.
And as a result, every once in a while when you do have to, like, for example,
Oh yeah, I have to like reset my pin every time. I'm like,
like
I don't
you
know
have a
how
new
to
pair of
do it.
glasses or something, and it's like, and I'm like, oh, dang, I can't remember what my pin was. I haven't
Yeah.
used it in a month. or
I
2
always
months.
find it funny because I don't use any facial recognition for my computers and my phone or anything.
No.
But I have a special, not special, but unique reason why.
I still want to try it out and see sometime. I would love to be able to try it out. And
on when the first facial recognition came out on the iPhone, my brother could unlock my phone.
yep,
For the people who don't know, I have an identical twin brother.
I'm gonna.
So even with the facial hair, he was able to unlock my phone.
Sure.
Interesting. I know that my current one has problems when I change certain things about like my face. You know, the easy one being glasses, but that's different. But other things like when I say change things about my face, you know, certain aspects, looking at it in different ways, etc.
Yeah,
So,
I find it funny because Google Photos is where I store, you know, my personal photos and stuff like that. My phone syncs to it and everything else like that. And Google Photos, I can post a picture of my kid at 6.
oh yeah.
And there's a picture of her at 17. And it's like, hey, is this the same person? It's like, yes. And it just like, okay, cool. We know that now. Thanks. And I know it's a different system, but right.
Yeah.
I will also say though that Google Photos has regularly presented me pictures of my brother and said, hey, is this you?
Yeah.
All right. So passwordless off, awesome, but not really passwordless necessarily, but yes, very good.
Password off.
All right. So things that's trends from this year. People adopting this is what you're saying.
Speaking of Microsoft, Eric, you had a good point about Microsoft's change in approach this year.
Okay, so we can move to that.
Small change, just a little tiny.
Just a little one. So Microsoft this
minuscule.
Year, minuscule. Throughout this past year has like done a 180 on certain aspects when it comes to security.
Which is good.
Yes, this is a good 180, not a bad 180. Microsoft has historically had this idea, which has been enforced by their user population, that they need to support everything they ever did since the beginning of time to now. You know, that guy who had his Windows X device and then upgraded it to Windows 95, to Windows 2000, blah, 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 to Windows 11. Now they've started removing features or deprecating them entirely so that in the next few years they can go away. Somebody's laughing. What did I say?
I'm sorry. Using Windows X, and my brain immediately went to Nathan running Windows on his OS X machine. That's where I went to, and I know that wasn't what you meant.
I don't think there was never a Windows X, right?
No. Windows.x has.
I mean, there was a Windows X.
Windows 10, right? That's what you meant.
Yes.
OS X.
But
sorry.
To go back, so the big ones that very shortly, I think, is going to be permanently enforced. SMB signing, one of the things that we have used forever with relays and all of these other techniques. SMB signing is the default setting for Windows now.
Please turn it off.
Please turn it off. So unless people like to turn it off, it's on.
Do you remember just a few years ago when we argued about that, Eric? Because I was making the argument that we should recommend everybody has to turn it on everywhere all the time. And you're like, but it breaks so many things and enterprises just can't do it. And
it still breaks so many things.
It does break so many things, but yes. And I agree. I've shifted my perspective on it. You should have it on and then turn it off where you don't need it. So yes, it used to be that you turn on SB signing and you watch that like file copy of your Word document take 10 minutes. Now, it doesn't really do anything. So it is much better. It is a very good control. But so there was that one. There's
NTLM.
They have announced their planned replacement so that NTLM can go away 100%. It is Kerberos with a couple of extra changes, but yes, they want to actually disable NTLM. Done.
Which I'll point out, that is fairly in line with the NIST 80. I'm going blank. What's the NIST password authentication?
800.
800.53.
800.63b is the one word defined, because there was an appendix in that, because that's one where everybody said, 8 characters is enough and you don't have to rotate and all this. But there's an appendix where it says, if it's possible for an attacker to get hashes, none of this applies.
Yeah.
And so that was where I always pointed out, so this doesn't apply to Windows or Linux or OS X or anything else. but it sounds like Microsoft is going in a direction for that to be able to apply.
Yep. And the last one that I have on top of my mind is the fact that Microsoft says, you know what? We agree that you need MFA on your administrative and privileged accounts in Azure. And even if you haven't said it, we're going to start enforcing it by other means on you in the near future.
Nice.
Yes. So right there, by default, you have a member of one of these roles, you will have MFA. We aren't going to let you not have it.
Awesome.
So those are big shifts, right? It's usually been do what you want, have fun. We'll try and help. And they're actively trying to get rid of some of these things that cause major problems. So,
I actually don't believe, James asked, does anyone believe Microsoft would have made the change to SMB without Eternal Blue / NotPetya? And I actually don't think that Eternal Blue and NotPetya is the main thing that has driven this. I think the main thing that has driven this is the threat of regulation and penalties to the vendors who are causing, who are quote unquote causing the breaches. Right. There's a lot of talk over in Europe. There's talk in DC that, holding organizations that are compromised liable, and holding the vendors who are rolling this stuff out insecurely as liable. And I actually believe that is what has driven this, based on some of the things Microsoft has said, some of the things other people have said. I don't know that I'm right, but I think that is the key thing that changed it, not a specific vulnerability. I think that specific vulnerability absolutely drove awareness and things like that to the general public.
Microsoft had already started trying to get rid of the underlying problem before that was released. So I don't
think I would say it's an either or. Like, it's all right. I mean, you could argue that even the regulations and the industry drive is a result of this stuff continuing to happen, right? And so, I think all of that influenced Microsoft and But Kevin's right. Like, the money stuff, at the end of the day, the threat of regulations and fines and all that's going to make the big decisions.
That's why every website you go to now asks you to check a box that says you're okay with cookies, because that has made us more secure and private.
It's fun. But what you just said kind of leads into the other thing, one of the other trends, right? Which is not only are organizations slightly being held more accountable, but CISOs themselves, right, are being found accountable for things.
No.
Kevin disagrees.
Sorry, you got me. I ranted on the Shared Security podcast about this.
Okay,
every headline talks about how, the CISOs being held accountable. Both examples of CISOs being held accountable, they were being held accountable for breaking the law, not because the organization was compromised. But the organization being compromised is what caused the investigation. The breach is what caused the police to be talking to them, the FBI to be talking to them. This is the same conversation, and I'm going to be political here in a weird way, but this is the same conversation about Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton was impeached for lying under oath when he was asked if he had cheated on his wife while he was the president. And many legal scholars, of which Kevin is not one, have argued that while, yes, it is true that he lied under oath, that was absolutely not a question that should have been asked of him like that, right? And so we put them into a position. So we can't say, he was impeached because he slept with a person that wasn't his wife, because that's not true. He was impeached because he lied under oath. This is the same thing with the CISOs. When we talk about the Uber breach, right? I'm blanking on his name. I keep wanting to say John Scott, but that's not right. He was not charged and fined because Uber was breached. He was charged and fined because he lied to investigators, and he knew he was lying to investigators, and because his background was a lawyer, a prosecutor, he knew lying to the investigators was wrong, and they showed proof that he knew it. So this is that I do not believe that CISOs are not being held accountable. And I absolutely believe with the new rules coming out of the SEC and things like that, that we are going to see CISOs being held accountable for breaches and for not doing the right things. But every example we've had so far is people being held accountable for breaking the actual law.
Okay.
Sorry.
But you bringing up the SEC brings me to a different thing that we saw this year. Unless somebody wants to continue on about the CISOs.
No, I'm good.
Okay. So we can't talk about 2023 or 2022 or 2021 or probably, even before that, without talking about ransomware. Still around, going to be around. Yay, ransomware. But the new ways that we have to ransom people came out this year. The unfortunate group of people who were hacked didn't, for whatever reason, because I don't have any of the details of what happened, the SEC put in place that, you need to declare that you have been breached with that X amount of time. The company did not tell the SEC, and therefore the ransomware group themselves filed a complaint to the SEC that they had breached this company and they had not notified everybody.
I do think it's important to note to mention the fact that the requirement to notify the SEC was not in effect yet.
Yeah, fair.
When the ransomware thing, like a lot of people blew up about that, but that rule was not in effect at the time.
Yep.
And in my opinion, and I know there's addendums and clarifications and stuff like that, this rule by the SEC and the FBI actually just released a paper, Monday?
I didn't see it.
The FBI released a process. So if you are a victim of an attack, the FBI now has a process for you to say to the FBI, hey, tell the SEC I can't tell them right now.
Nice.
Right. And it's because of the concern that we've all talked about. And we've talked about it publicly. We've talked about it on, internally, is that one, you say, okay, the minute I get breached, I have to tell people. Okay, I get that. I understand that. I like that in theory. But the reality is, when do you know that you've been breached? When do you know? How do you know? How many times do we see, okay, we were breached, but we don't think any data was taken. Oh, well, a week later, we realized data was taken. Oh, well, we realized, look at Okta. 1% of our users got hit. All of our users. They just forgot 2 zeros. The problem was the 2 zeros were to the right of the one, not to the left. Oh. And, I find it interesting that the federal government themselves aren't real clear on what we should do with reporting to the government.
Well, they aren't, and they tried to clarify that. I can't remember when that court case, or not the court case, when the ruling came out on it, and they voted on it. But it was a little it was, in my opinion, quite obscure. Exactly when does that requirement take place? It's not when you get notified that you've been breached necessarily. It's once you've verified that data has actually been stolen or something like that. Yeah. Anyway, so there's, to your point, this isn't it's not black and white. It's like gradients as you get up to it. Yeah. And so how do you know at what point are you actually supposed to start notifying people, or when does that deadline start? It doesn't start as soon as a ransomware person says, hey, I've attacked your systems, because at that point you don't know if anything's been taken.
Eric and I did a tabletop with a large organization a few months back, and their lawyer was making that point that the way they have it defined is, once they determine that it is an incident and they start the incident response process, that's when that's when the timing starts. That's their terminology internally. I don't know if that's legal, but that's what they call it. And so up to that point, they intentionally don't call it an incident. They call it something else. They start the investigation. Once they have enough evidence to tip it over for their clarification, this is an incident, that's when they start the
right. And that makes sense. The problem is that not every organization does exactly the same thing. But from the ransomware attacker's perspective, they're looking at it as black and white.
Yeah.
And
okay, I got a question for you guys. Do you remember back when IDSs first came out? And the guidance from so many consultants.
Oh, hold on. Can I take it from a different perspective? I remember when it first came out to the company I worked at, and they said we had to put it on a domain controller. And I said, this is a really bad idea, guys. And they said, no, it'll be fine. And I said, I really think this is a bad idea.
It's going to be bad.
No, it'll be fine. And so we did. And the DC said, I'm not going to talk to anybody
anymore. Yeah, nice. But no, when intrusion detection systems came out, right as they started to get a little bit more popular, there was guidance by lawyers and accountants and investors and whatever that if you were a public company, you could not deploy an IDS. And the logic, and please understand, I'm not saying I agree with this or agreed with it then, but the logic they used was the rules were as a public company that if you knew you had a breach, you had to deal with something, if you knew there was a problem. And so, honeypots as well. Exactly, Sean. And what they said was, hey, if you're a public company, if you don't know you were breached, you don't have to tell anybody. So stop monitoring. And I'm curious if the SEC or any of these other groups are going to modify their rulings to say, not only do you have to tell us about it, but you have to actually look for it. like this idea of when the IR process starts, you have to call it that the timer starts. Great. Yeah. I stopped doing IR. Right. Like, and I don't know that I'm not saying, I'm not recommending that. I'm saying that I totally can see, Elon Musk making that decision.
That's how I dealt with my cholesterol for years.
Just didn't get it measured.
Well, the place that I gave blood would send me a letter like 2 weeks later saying, hey, blah, 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 your cholesterol is just a tad bit high. It could be coincidence, but if you see this on consecutive letters, you should talk to a doctor. So I didn't open every other one.
Right. It was perfect. It was perfect. Right. Yeah. I don't own a scale. I'm not fat.
So here's a different question though. So we're talking from the defender side, technology wise, et cetera. So is this a new way of ransoming a company though? Forget money wise.
I think it's a negotiation tactic.
Well, absolutely, I can see that, but I mean, forget the fact some company, some bad group out there doesn't even try and hack company X, files a complaint. What happens?
I mean, that would trigger an investigation. I'm sure they would start looking into, is it really true? But what's the complaint public? Yeah, what's the benefit to the attacker? What's the benefit to the attacker?
You're thinking financially. I'm thinking otherwise. I'm going to file a complaint. I'm trying to hurt this company.
Yeah. Reputation.
Well, so and if we look at the IRS model, right? If you report a tax fraud, if you say, hey, my boss didn't take out this money, or hey, I know this guy who's bragging about this, the IRS gives you like 10% of what they recover or 20% of what they recover. Yeah. If the SEC goes the same route, there's actually a financial benefit to reporting somebody.
There was the government paying the hacker.
There was a really similar situation. I know it was popular in Texas a couple years back, where this group was basically going and leaving bad reviews on restaurants in Yelp and Google and whatnot. And then basically they would go to the restaurant and say, hey, we will take these down if you pay us. If you don't, we're just going to keep doing this until you're, and how many
modern version of protection.
Yeah. You should pay us to protect your windows, because it would be a shame if somebody came along and broke your windows.
Broke them. Yeah.
So yeah, I'm wondering. That's kind of leading, I guess, into predictions for 2024. I wonder if we're going to see more filings or not.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I think
yeah, that's an easy prediction. Yes.
Yes.
Well, regardless if we see them, every business is already thinking about that.
Yep.
Like I've had 2 people say, like, hey, how does this impact how we should respond to ransomware? If we get ransomware, like, do we have to assume they're going to notify us now? And what does that mean? What does that look like? Or that they're going to notify for us?
Yeah.
Best case scenario is just don't get ransomware.
Yeah, that would be a nice idea. So, yeah. I don't know. We've talked about a whole bunch of stuff. We haven't talked about apps in general, though.
AppSec.
AppSec. What do you think, Jason? What did we see this year?
It's going to get better because I joined the board. No.
Yeah.
All application problems are about to be solved.
I think just looking at trends, I mean, we still see legacy applications. They still have legacy vulnerabilities. I wish I had some numbers to share. I was talking about that earlier, but I don't. But I do know that we had multiple applications through pen tests in the past year where we did encounter SQL injection. So yes, that is actually still
not just us. There's a whole ransomware group out of Korea, China, one of the two that is actively destroying companies through SQL injection.
Yeah. So that is still a thing. I mean, watch out for that. And just because you have a modern application doesn't mean you're protected against SQL injection. I mean, if it doesn't have a database, you probably are, or at least a relational database. But there's other ways to get data out. And so what we are seeing is a continued large push. This started a few years ago, and it's definitely, the trend has definitely continued of moving towards APIs, microservices, serverless type of architecture with apps. And what we've noticed is in a lot of those cases, a lot of the traditional types of like OWASP top 10 type of findings, you might not find as much, especially those that are more geared towards automation. So things that an automated scanner can find,
Sure.
We find fewer of those, but we are finding an increased number of things that you would find through manual testing, such as sensitive information leaking out of the application, going to your analytics and that sort of thing. We've found lots and lots of that this past year.
Or auth bypasses. John, like our number one guy,
bypasses.
controlling all apps that he tests. It's mine now.
I think it's important to note that we've seen I believe, again, I don't have numbers, but we've seen more organizations that we've worked for year after year starting to focus on app security.
Mm-hmm.
And we're seeing more people coming to us and right up front being concerned, like, hey, we have this app. And the thing that I find interesting is, for years, we have said to companies that offer a software solution, a SaaS provider or whatever, hey, your clients are going to want you to have this pen tested. And in the past, that was often something we were convincing them of. And now we're seeing, and we have been for last year or two.
It's a continued trend as well.
Yeah, that people are actually saying, our customer has asked us to do this. Can we have this done? Or we're having companies come to us and say, we're about to buy this software. Can you test it? Right. And so I'm happy to see that there is one, because I'm a greedy capitalist, but two, I think it's good that we're seeing people understanding that, I have a firewall it has not been for a very long time a good answer, but they now realize we were right.
Yeah.
What about, I don't think I could go 2 weeks at this point without getting some notification of X number of repos found, compromised or all of these things. Not like a company made their repo public, but the dependencies, PyPy libraries, all these things being compromised and being suddenly imported into all of these other apps.
It's okay. Yeah. Software bill of materials will solve that.
Moving on. It's all serious.
Yeah, no, I think it's a valid question.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's going to continue. I think that's why tools like dependency track from OWASP or SNCC or whatever are so important to understand. Is
because
the dependency on third parties. We've always said to developers, don't reinvent the wheel, right? And now we're finding out that reinventing the wheel
would be better.
No, I wouldn't say it would be better. It just has a different risk level.
No, but here's the thing though. If you look at modern popular languages, and I'm going to pick on JavaScript as one of the main ones. Python is just like it though. They have these massive package ecosystems with lots and lots and lots of options. So when you bring in a dependency, you don't just bring in that dependency, you bring in that dependencies, and et cetera, et cetera. So it is possible within, like if you're building a Node.js app, to import one thing. And then that actually, if you look inside your Node modules folder, and I know I'm diving into a little bit of technical detail at this point, but that Node modules folder, you realize it has over 100 entries from that one import that you made. That's the type of problem that we're experiencing. And a lot of that is developers are trying to build rapidly out of convenience. Doing this in a secure fashion was never part of the real thought on that ecosystem. So
I'm going to make a prediction. And this is something probably 5 or 6 years ago, I said, if I was in charge of a nation state adversarial group with a large budget, this is what I would do. And we keep seeing the direction there. I think that at some point in the future, whether that's 2 years, 5 years, whatever, we're going to look back and we're going to find out that there's some large shell companies that have started gaining access to some of these different dependencies and maintaining them so that in cyber type situations, whether we call it cyber war or whatever, that some of those nation states have, and I'm including the U.S. in that they have capabilities to be able to push down, because this is such a large attack surface that I can't believe that we don't have attackers that are doing that are actively trying. Like, I think what we see in the news is the one-offs, these small attack groups that go after this, and they're trying to cash out quickly. But I think in the future we're going to look back and we're going to see like some people have been playing the long game in some of this too.
Yeah,
fair.
I just said that so it's on the recording, so later I can come back.
So it's on the recording. Perfect.
I told you so.
I said back in 2023. So, all right, we left off the big thing because we said we'd push it.
AI.
AI.
AI everywhere. I mean, there's AI. So one of the biggest things I noticed is the conferences that I went to this past year. There seemed to be a lot of vendors that were either touting an AI solution, or that was their entire purpose of being there, was AI based. And a lot of it is towards like, we can do AI pen testing for you and that sort of thing. I'm going to toss this over to Kevin. What are your thoughts about AI pen testing? Because
I think my thoughts have been made very clear by John Strand recently. It's okay. Let me stop, because I'm going to try not to make this an explicit podcast and or webcast or whatever the heck it is. The reality is that one, AI doesn't exist yet, right? Not that we're aware of.
General AI,
right. Two, every product I have looked at currently that touts itself as AI pen testing is fancy vuln scanning. I do not believe that it is impossible to do some form of AI pen testing, but the current solutions are fancy vuln scanning, pretending to be a pen test, and this is a problem, right? I will pick on one in particular that I've actually been very happy with how they've presented it, and that is Horizon 3. Now, I want to be very clear. I've not done anything with Horizon 3. I haven't tried the product or whatever, but I've looked at their marketing. I've looked at their website. I've looked at their stuff. And what I really like about them is that they are promoting their AI pen testing tool, not as a pen test in and of itself, but as a tool the pen tester can use to do stuff, right? So that is what it is currently. And that I think that AI pen test tools are the next step of Nessus. And that is good. And it will help us and it will make things better, as long as we stop paying attention to the marketing that says it replaces your need for a pen test, because it is one, right?
I think it's important, like, especially if we're talking about if the focus is on LLM based solutions, because I mean, there's different aspects to AI, but LLM is the one that's been really big in the past year.
Yes. And
you have to realize and understand, what is an LLM actually good at and what is it really not that good at. It's not, even though it gives you the illusion that it may actually have a consciousness. Yes, that's the word. It doesn't. Yep. And so it can play games with you. And I think it does the same thing when people are looking at, well, could it potentially run a pen test for me? And it could potentially run a pen test for you. It just wouldn't be very good.
Well, I would argue that it's the same as having a very junior level pen tester that just knows how to Google, right? Like, you've got somebody that knows how to read the documentation and read the tools. They don't have a lot of creativity, but they can say, okay, what are some ideas that are out there? And they can read what other people have done.
It could, yeah. And in that aspect, it's digesting the information on the internet. But what it's really good at is transforming information. That's where the transformer part comes from. But also like consolidating information. So I think that it's actually very useful in other contexts, not necessarily with pen tests, although it could be applied to pen tests, where you have lots of information that you then need to somehow summarize or get to, what are the most salient points of all of this data that I have.
Yep.
That is the part that I think it actually could do very well. And one of the places where we see this is in the dark web, right? So we have, we work with a partner of ours, Flare, and they provide a whole bunch of what they do is they collect a whole bunch of data, and they're leveraging LLMs to help, how do we get all of this huge amount of data that's out there that we've collected and boil that down to what are the salient points for this particular organization at this point in time. And it makes it a lot easier to digest all of that data in a human form to, what's actually important to me right now.
Yep.
That I think it does well. But the actual testing part, I haven't seen any evidence that it could do that well yet.
I think what we're seeing is the amount of little stuff that tools can do is increasingly getting more powerful, right? And we've seen that if you go back to 2000 or the 90s, it was all manual, but we're seeing more and more tooling being able to do more and more. And to Sean's point, it's augmenting or enhancing the smart people. And I think what we're seeing is more and more of that automation is happening. So the value of that last 10 or 15% maybe is dropping a little bit because it's cheaper to get the other 85% than it was before. And I think we're going to continue to see that trend over time where, the organizations that really want that last 10 or 15% are going to be willing to pay for it. But a lot of orgs are going to be happy with, hey, I can get the 85% for, half the value, half the cost.
Yeah. So I think that brings us to a good time, especially since we're only have 9 minutes ish, maybe 10 left. So AI and predictions for 2024. So AI regulation already started right now, but what do we think? Do we think it's going to happen? And all right, I'll go back. AE regulation, since we're going to call it artificial enhancement there.
I'll let you guys go first because I've got a rant about the bill that's currently out there now.
Let's hear the rant because we only have 9 minutes. So go.
Have you seen the new bill for AI where if the social media network uses AI in any way, they aren't covered by Section 230? The bill was introduced, I want to say Tuesday. It is literally
no, I missed that one. I just heard about the one for EU. So
it is literally 2 paragraphs to show you how not serious this bill is. Senator Hawley, I think, is the idiot that put it forward, and I don't even know what political party he's part of.
That's an interesting. 230 is going down eventually anyway. Everybody just keeps taking shots at it.
God, I wish it wouldn't. People don't understand how important that is. One of the few things I'm like, yes, that regulation's good.
That's a whole nother podcast, but yeah.
Yeah, I know.
It's interesting. I can't remember which senator it was. And I don't remember. I think it was when Sam Altman was testifying before Congress.
Yeah.
And he was saying, we need regulation. This industry, there's risk here. There needs to be regulatory stuff going on. And one of the senators is like, you don't know what you're asking for. We are a bunch of slow moving old people that barely understand this. And your technology is moving so fast that by the time we get regulation out there, it's going to be 5 years, it's going to be outdated and useless. And so he's like, the industry has to regulate itself. And I think it was a Democrat that was saying it because I was like, what, US.
Yeah. I will tell you that I've ranted about Sam Altman's call for regulation the same way that I ranted about Zuckerberg's call for regulation. Altman's call for regulation is not to protect the world. Sam Altman's call for regulation was to keep his competitors who don't have as high level as he does yet of funding behind. Because what you see, and you see it time and time again with new technologies, a company comes out with something, they get ahead of other people, and then they go to the government and go, hey, you know what? I'm being responsible here. This is dangerous. And if you don't regulate it and slow us down, because they can afford to handle the regulation and their
what's the term for that? There's a term for that.
There is a term, and I can't remember what it is. Yeah.
But I think it also gives them an opportunity to help drive the regulation so that it fits their purposes.
Absolutely. Here's my answer. It's the same answer I've always given. We're going to get regulation. It's going to do nothing or be awful. Those are our 2 choices. And it's because of exactly what that senator said. The regulation can't keep up. Heck, company policies can't keep up. And nobody is going on the news doing sound bites about whether or not the company policy needs to be updated, right? And that's just going to slow it down, what I'm getting at. So regulation is going to happen. It's going to suck.
All right. So moving on from that one, I don't know how to change it. I think that there you go. All right, moving on.
Sums it up. It's just going to suck. There you go. Yeah.
I do think, though, as we, I think even Jason said it before, right? We're seeing AI everywhere. I think you are going to see it in everything, right?
Yeah.
If it doesn't say it has AI, if your remote doesn't say it has AI in the near future, nobody's going to want to buy it. So
yeah, I don't think it's going to replace pen testers.
Different story. I just think
it's going to replace crappy ones.
It's going to replace a lot, right? Like
Yeah.
right now, every Bob's Bait and Tackle and pen testing services, is selling a pen test. I think it's going to replace a lot of those guys, or at least they're not going to have to pay a person now. They can just buy this tool and provide the same level of quality they had before.
Yeah. I think here's what I predict, but it's not going to happen in 2024. We're going to have the same guidance from the PCI Council that we got in 2012 or whatever it was, when the PCI Council came out and said a vuln scan isn't a pen test. We're going to get the same guidance within the next year or two, where the PCI Council says an AI pen test is not a pen test.
I think that's
my prediction. I don't know if I'm right, but
or the opposite. If they say it is, then we have a problem.
We as an industry have a problem.
DSS4 expanded some of that a little bit with some of the additional guidance. They actually talked about that, about it can't just be a fully automated thing.
Yeah, okay, good. I didn't realize that was out there, but I think they're going to explicitly call out AI.
Yep.
What's the next big trend? What does somebody think?
Retiring from InfoSec and doing something not tech. That's what the Twitter polls have been all last 2 weeks. Practically every person I follow that has asked that question, and I don't know if it's all we're burning out because it's the end of the year and we're busy.
I was going to say, it is towards the end of the year and we're all very, very
all
busy.
going to throw away our laptops. And
I think for the last 3 or 4 years, or maybe longer, we've been pushing the skills gap, and there's all these jobs that need to be hired. And so many people jumped into InfoSec thinking, oh, I'll make all the money and this will be awesome. And it ended up being harder. And then you've got people on the other end that have been doing it for years and are burned out with just how things are changing.
Yeah.
We don't need more workers in InfoSec. What we need is more skilled workers in InfoSec. And that's the challenge. Where do you get that skill and experience? And I think that's going to continue to be a challenge. And part of it's because, well, on the one hand, just trying to keep up with all of the technologies that you need to know something about in order to be able to do this stuff. That list just keeps growing. So really the people who are in the best position are those who have really, really good tech and problem solving skills. And so they can be thrown into something that they don't understand and figure it out.
I've told people for years, when they ask, how do I get into InfoSec? I said, if you can do anything else, do it.
That move. Yep.
Like if you're just absorbed in the industry and you can't think about anything else and it's all you do in your spare time, all right, well then you're probably the right person. But I'll throw out another prediction there. We don't have to talk too much about it, but I think cybersecurity insurance, the insurance industry and the requirements, regulations, all that, I think that's going to drive compliance standard, like meeting standards better than any of the government regulations.
Yep.
Because it comes back to the money and the risk.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you right now, our most recent renewal, which was last month, Jason, the forms we had to fill out were much more specific on the controls we were rolling out. Whereas, in previous years, they would ask things like, are you doing security? And we'd be like, yes. And you know what I mean? Like, and now they're the questionnaire to go to the underwriters is actually, it's not there yet, but it's
getting
asking
detailed,
legitimate questions now.
It's like, here's a whole spreadsheet of information. Like, there's a lot more detail required now.
It seems like there's two directions in the industry. There's the companies that are saying, we're not going to ask a lot of detail and just assume you're not secure, but we're also not going to cover a ton and it'll be cheap.
Yep.
And then the other, if you want serious coverage that, we're going to pay for stuff, then you got to provide all the detail.
Yeah, we've got serious coverage because they asked a lot of dang questions. So awesome. Well,
that was any last topic I was going to say before we shut it down. I'm good.
No, I think I've ranted enough.
I'm done.
Yeah. Right. Hey everybody, thank you very much for joining us. I'm gonna turn it over to Jeannie to do her, her outro. Call it. So.
She's gone.
She's like, we're going to do the outro. Good.
Well, hey, everybody. Thank you very much for coming in. I'm going to stop recording now and enjoy yourselves.
Yep. Happy holidays. Enjoy the time.
Yes.